As Allison said, my name is Chris Carlson. I'm the Assistant Public Works Director with the City of Superior. Um, I've been at the city about 22 years. I started off in our wastewater and stormwater division, so I have stormwater running through my blood. And since about 2015, I've been in my current position as Assistant Public Works Director. A little bit about Superior, for those of you that may not be familiar. We're up at the very northern tip of Wisconsin, right on the western tip of Lake Superior. We have a population of about 27,000 people. It's interesting because we share a border with Minnesota, and right across the bridge is Duluth. So that's a metropolitan area of probably about 80, 90,000 people. So while we have a smaller population, it's really a larger metropolitan area, which creates some unique challenges. We are the county seat for Douglas County. Our city encompasses about 44 square miles, and we have about 300 miles of roadway. It's kind of interesting. We have a population of 27,000, but a square area of 44 square miles, which is quite a bit, which creates some other unique challenges because the city is kind of spread out, which creates a lot of roadway to maintain. In addition, beyond just local roads, we have a number of state highways that cross through the city. I have some listed here, as well as an interstate. We have Interstate 535 that comes over the Blotnick Bridge into Superior, as well as US Highway 2 and 53 and State Highway 35 and 105. So a lot of very different kinds of roadways that we maintain. And then as we're talking about salt, we have an average snowfall of about 63 inches per year. That can vary tremendously. I think a couple of years ago, we had over 100, 140 inches. Last year, we barely had any snow, which was a real outlier. So it can really vary quite a bit. But with all those roads and maintenance, we have to think about the winter operations and clearing roads, clearing ice, making the roads safe. And one of the tools to do that is obviously salt. But because if you're on this webinar, you're probably concerned about salt in the environment. So we're concerned about that too. So, as we know, salt has short-term benefits. It can clear ice and snow real well. It melts snow, melts the ice, can make the roads appear to be safer, but also has some dramatic long-term impacts as well. Again, if you're on this webinar, you're probably already pretty familiar with that, but can result in elevated chloride levels in lakes and rivers, soil and groundwater contamination, and there's a lot of deterioration of vehicles and road infrastructure too. Cars can rust out quite a bit, and things people don't think about all the time either is like things like bridges and stuff too, where the salt can attack the bridges and cause those to deteriorate. And salt, quite frankly, has a lot of costs. It's an environmental cost, but also there's a financial cost too. It's not a cheap product to be using. So, as we're thinking about salt usage, we're thinking about the short-term benefits of what it can mean today during a snowstorm, but also what are the long-term impacts in terms of damage to the environment and cost, particularly the damage to the environment, because it's a very long-term impact. Salt is very, very difficult, if not almost impossible, very difficult to remove from the environment in a large scale. There's desalination and stuff, but it's a really costly and challenging process. So the better idea is to keep salt out of the environment on the front end and not have to deal with trying to remove it later on. But salt can have a lot of impacts on, like I said, the lakes and rivers and the water and aquatic life and things like that. So as a city, we've really worked to try to decrease our salt usage over the years. This chart kind of highlights that a little bit. It shows by the season a few things. One, our total snow accumulation. Again, you can see that really varies over time from 22 inches back in 2014, 2015 to all the way up to 140 inches a couple of years ago. Last year's not listed on here is because we barely had any snow and I didn't get a chance to update it, but it also shows our salt usage in tons per those seasons. So looking at this number, you can see it varies quite a bit, and that can be due to a lot of factors. But over the years, we've tried to steadily have that number decrease. Probably a more important number than this one, though, is this next column, our salt usage per inch of snowfall. So we also measure how much snowfall we've had, obviously. So you divide these two numbers and can figure out how much salt we're using per inch of snow. And that's the number really we want to try to reduce. If we have huge snows, we're to use more salt. If we have less snow, use less salt, but also how much salt are we using in that event to attack that, that amount of snow. And when you look at this number, you can see it's pretty dramatically over the years, we've really worked to decrease this number, all the way from a high of around 65 tons per inch, all the way down to 17. So it's a pretty dramatic decrease over time. And as we do that, we look at what are some of the tools that we do that, some different strategies we use. The first one I listed, which isn't one people always necessarily think about first, but in my mind, perhaps one of the most important, is administrative support. And what I mean by that is not only employees of the city, but also elected officials of the city, the mayor, the city council. Their support is really incredibly important as we look at reducing salt usage in our winter operations. And unfortunately for us, our current mayor, Jim Payne, and our city council has been very forward-thinking and very protective of the environment and really conscious of the impact salt can have on the environment. So they've been great advocates, really pushing us on the operational level to use less salt. So that's been really, really beneficial. It can be challenging if you have officials that are the opposite and they want you to use more salt and clear the snow off quicker. So we've been really fortunate to have elected officials that really stand behind us and really push us to reduce salt in our winter operations. Another thing we have is a winter road maintenance policy. I find that really useful too, because like in the absence of officials that are pressing you to do that, it's great to have policy that reinforces and codifies what your policy as a city is. And our road policy is online. You can follow the link to it. It talks about a lot of different things. What are our priority routes, what order we do things in, how we attack snow and ice in the winter, alternate site parking. There's all kinds of different things it talks about. But one of the most important ones it talks about is road salt considerations. So right in our policy, we talk in there for over a page about road salt, its impact on the environment, and what our approach to is, and our goal to try to minimize it over time. I find that really valuable. Because I find too, like when people call in the winter and they're, it's the middle of a snowstorm, they want the roads cleared now, they want clear, dry pavement, and they're not seeing that. They say use more salt. It's really helpful to point to a policy and say, well, we're not making these decisions on the fly. We're following policy that's been, approved by our Public Works Committee, gone through our City Council for approval, and we're just executing the plan that's been laid out. It's really nice to have those answers when you're talking to the public. Our policy, also lays out expectations, which I think is important too. Also, when you're talking to the public, what are the expectations during and after a snowfall in terms of what the public should expect? Right in our policy, we have this language right here. The Public Works Department endeavors to maintain adequate traction for vehicles properly equipped for winter driving conditions. There's typically not an expectation for bare, dry pavement after snowfall or ice storm. During a snow event, the goal is to achieve at minimum, passable roadways, et cetera, et cetera. And if you read further down here, I think it's a really important part. A passable roadway does not mean dry or bare pavement. A dry or bare pavement condition may not exist until the weather conditions improve. I think it's really important in your snow policy and your salt usage to set expectations so people know what to expect. We might use less salt and you may not see dry, bare pavement as soon, but you will see it, but it just will take a little more time. So, like I said, I think administrative support and having a policy that clearly outlines your approach and expectations is really important to communicate to the public, especially, but also even to your own staff of, what our goals are. So everyone's clear and on the goals and working towards the same, working on the same path. In terms of other strategies, we try to reduce salt usage, but also how do we do that in a practical way? One is to not use as much salt by using other things in combination with salt. For example, We very rarely ever use straight salt on our roadways. Typically, we're always mixing salt with sand to create a salt sand mixture, usually 3 parts sand, 1 part salt. Um, Helps us use less salt. The sand gives a nice granular traction to the roadway, so it helps a lot with stopping and starting distances, and just really decreases the salt concentration overall by having that mixture. It also, frankly, decreases the cost quite a bit because sand is quite a bit cheaper than salt. So it's nice being able to mix the two together to create a mixture that works just as well, if not better than straight salt, but at a lower cost. Another product we've been using for many years is magnesium chloride. It's a liquid that we mix when we're dispensing the salt from the salt sand mixture from the truck. We mix in magnesium chloride. Does a couple of things when it pre-wets the salt, which makes it more effective and a more effective snow and ice melter. It also reduces the freezing temperature of the ice even lower. With pure salt, you can mainly still treat ice, down to 15 degrees Fahrenheit or so. Adding mag chloride takes that freezing temperature even down lower. So you're melting snow at a much lower temperature, maybe down to 0 degrees or even a little lower. So it's a great product, great tool to use to minimize salt usage and make it work more effectively. On the negative side, it is still a chloride, so it is still a form of salt. So while you're using less salt, you are still using a salt, which still has environmental concerns. And then more recently, probably 4 years ago or so, we invested in potassium acetate. Potassium acetate is a chemical that's been used for many, many years at airports. As you can imagine, pieces rusting and falling off cars is bad, but rusting and falling off airplanes is really bad. So potassium acetate has been used at airports because it has it's non-corrosive. It won't rust things. It's a non-chloride. It has very little environmental impact. It's organic, biodegradable liquid. So it has a great benefit in that it reduces, or you can eliminate the use of salt totally. It goes on as a liquid. There is the perhaps negative side is it is fairly expensive. So typically we use it in concert with salt to reduce salt usage, and we use it a lot as a pre-treatment. So we'll pre-treat bridge decks and things like that. So before snow and ice comes, they're pre-treated. So when it does start snowing, it starts melting sooner. So we don't have to use as much salt, when the snow does come. So potassium acetate's been a great tool for us to use. I mentioned there's no environmental impact. That's not entirely true. Well, there's not a salt or a corrosive impact. Potassium acetate can have a lot of oxygen demand when it hits water, so it can suck up a lot of the oxygen in the water. It's typically not a huge concern, but it does have a little bit of impact in that way. So it's been a great tool for us. Another great tool is that we've recently upgraded a lot of our standing trucks, our salting trucks. In 2019, we got 3 brand new units that are much more modern and much more advanced than the units that they replaced. Our previous units didn't have ability to put potassium acetate out, for example, whereas our new units, if you look at the back, they have a spray bar on them, which allows us to dispense chemical right on the roadway, liquid chemical right on the roadway. The other incredibly important part of them is they have modern computerized calibration and dispensary capabilities. Our old trucks were pretty rudimentary in the way that they dispersed salt. There really wasn't much for calibration other than a slide gate that you could open or close. So it was pretty rudimentary of, opening or closing this gate more to let less chemical out. Whereas the new trucks are computerized, so you can dial in exactly how many pounds per lane mile you want to dispense. That's helped tremendously for us to really understand how much salt we're putting on the roads, before, it was hard to really know for sure. And if an operator felt like they needed more salt, they could just go and open the gate a little more, and it would be hard to really manage or control that. Now it's all computer controlled and reported, so we always know, how much salt we're putting out of our trucks. It's been a huge upgrade to our fleet and a huge improvement for us in our winter operations. In addition to having computer control for salt dispensing, they also have a lot of other cool modern features. For example, they have GPSs in the units. One thing we've been trying to do is to be more transparent and communicate better with the public. A lot of times on Facebook and things like that, you always hear the public saying, well, why aren't the plow trucks out? The plow trucks aren't out. Well, usually they are out. So one thing we try to do is display that for the public to see. So on the right, you can see a portal that we have that displays directly to the public through our website, showing the current locations of the plow trucks in our city. So any citizen can go on to the portal, pull up the website and look and see where the plow trucks are and see also where they've been. But when the trucks go through an area, they leave a path behind them, and you can see, not only when have they been there, but how long ago they've been there. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours ago. It'll show you based on color codes when the trucks were there. This tool has also been incredibly helpful from the supervision side of the coin as well, where supervisors can watch and see where the trucks are and manage, where they need to go, better plan the routes, see if a spot's been missed. Just from the office, you can sit and see where the trucks are going and where they've been, and make those decisions in real time. It's been really, really helpful. The trucks also give all kinds of other great detailed information through the computers on board. We receive daily reports that can show, where the trucks have been, how long have they been driving, how long have they been active, how long have they been sitting idle. Can show cost analysis reports that can actually show, what did the day cost in terms of fuel and time, how often are the trucks sitting idle, what was the cost of that idle time. So these tools really help us better manage our operations and really understand, how things are going on the street, and be able to course correct and adjust to those conditions as we see them. So it's been really helpful. Another salt reduction strategy that we use is to don't salt every road. As you look at this map, the lines that are colored are the routes that we use salt on. So we don't salt every street. We don't salt residential streets. We only salt state highways and main collector routes. Different colors represent different sanding routes, but yeah, everything in color receives salt. Anything not in color does not receive salt. When it gets really icy, we'll still just use straight sand on residential intersections, but we won't use salt on those. So, as you look at our map, we put salt on maybe 20% of our actual roadway, which helps a lot. Dramatically saves on salt costs, but also dramatically saves on salt we're putting in the environment and the impact that salt has to the environment. Other strategies we use in our salt reduction is staff training and education. We want to make sure our staff understands that we're trying to reduce salt as well. Because, they hear feedback from the public too, why aren't you using more salt, or why isn't the road bare, clean, dry pavement yet? So it's important for them to understand what our strategies are and what our goals are of why we're trying to reduce salt. So every year annually, we have what we call our snow rodeo, which is a great time to get all of our public works street staff together and talk to them about all kinds of different subjects from, what are some of the challenges we had last year? How do we make those challenges better? What are some of the accidents we had last year? How do we minimize accidents, minimize our liability? Go through all kinds of different subjects. A big part of it, though, is also talking about salt and salt usage and going over how much salt we used last year and ideas and strategies for how we use less salt going into the future. In addition to training staff and educating them, we also work a lot to change public expectations and try to educate the public as well. Sometimes that's a bit of a slower process, but we're working on it constantly to try to get our message out there that salt has a negative impact to the environment. And while it's important to us to make sure we make the roads safe, how do we make them safe by using less salt? What those expectations should be. It's a message that we're constantly putting out there through Facebook and news flashes and our city website. In a minute, Megan will take over and talk about a lot of the public education that we do. Meeting the public where they are, going to events, setting up tables, doing public education events, doing a lot to get that message out there to make people understand salt has a benefit, has a use, but also has negative impacts on the cost. And how do we minimize that cost? And then I put this one there, a little bit of a joke, ban social media. We can't ban social media, and social media definitely has its benefits. But also, I think people in positions, whether it's city staff or elected officials, need to take social media with a grain of salt and kind of not let social media drive what our policy is, or let social media determine, our success or our failure. Because a lot of times we have a big snowstorm and right away there's people on there saying, why aren't the roads clear? Why aren't the plows out? Plows are probably out. We're working on clearing the roads, but sometimes social media, unfortunately, tends to skew towards the negative opinions, and that sometimes can become the narrative. So, I think it's important to remember that's not necessarily reflecting the opinions of the city or the citizens in general. So I think it's important to understand that and not let that become the driving narrative to, well, we should be using more salt to get more salt on the streets. That's not necessarily the right answer. And social media definitely shouldn't drive that expectation. That's my little soapbox about social media, because we struggle with that a fair amount, when a snow event's happening and we get feedback that's not always of the positive kind, even though very positive things are happening out on the street. So with that, I'll end my portion. I just kind of want to go through, what we do as a city, how we identify the salt is a major concern for us, particularly being on the shores of Lake Superior and having major rivers run through our city. We have a lot of concern about chlorides getting into the water, and we always want to find ways to minimize them, and kind of went through some of the strategies we use to do that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan now, and she's going to take over and talk about our public education and some other things regarding salt in the city of Superior. With that, I'll stop sharing. If I can find the right button. There we go. And with that, I'll turn that over to Megan.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris. And yeah, I've got a few questions. We got one that came in, but we'll turn it over to Megan and then we'll take those questions at the end.
Sounds good.
So Megan, you can pull up your screen share and we'll go from there. All right. I think you might be muted right now yet, Megan. There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, perfect.
You can see everything okay?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay. Thanks, Chris and Allison, of course. I'm happy to jump on and talk about the public works salt reduction training. But again, my name is Megan and I'm a water resources specialist with the City of Superior. I work in the Environmental Services Division. It's a division of the Public Works Department. So it's a place where we essentially manage the stormwater and the stormwater and wastewater from our city. So I do outreach and education specifically on wastewater and stormwater. And so in addition to Chris's conversation about the citywide snow management and salt reduction, ESD, the Environmental Services Division, provides information and an annual training to the public works employees about the importance of pollution prevention to protect our water resources, which includes salt reduction practices and steps to take that protect our water resources. And so this training is in addition to, I know Chris mentioned the snow rodeo. So this is an additional part of the city's pollution prevention management and strategy programming. There's a whole lot of stuff we do up here But this training started back in 2014, and it's part of our municipal separate storm sewer system permit requirement. So it's kind of within the conversation of stormwater pollution prevention, best practices, good housekeeping. And we eventually added kind of the conversation and education around salt reduction in 2016. So, and the four kind of main groups are the Environmental Services Division, Maintenance and Collections crew. So the City of Superior has about 4 wastewater facilities, wastewater treatment facilities, and the ESD Maintenance and Collections crew, they take care of most of that snow management and ice and such during the winter at those 4 facilities. Usually it's so it's manually done. There's some plows, but so I'm usually working and talking with those crews on pollution prevention conversations because it's part of our permit, but also I work at that one of those facilities. So we're seeing the different practices they do. But then with the streets department, the snow rodeo happens every year. I bundle up some conversations around pollution prevention, salt reduction, and I pass it off to the streets department superintendent because sometimes it's really helpful for the public works employees to hear these kind of guidelines and practices from the person that they take, quote unquote, orders from. And for that case, it works better for the superintendent to kind of wrap everything up together because they have a huge day of trainings. I think it might even be a couple days. I could be wrong. But then also the police department and fire department, I do have pollution prevention conversations with them. And those conversations include illicit discharge detection and elimination, which is essentially don't dump anything down the drain or the ditch or road or anything unless it's stormwater. Storm drains connect our streets to our streams. So we're really looking to eliminate anything that's entering our stormwater conveyance systems that isn't stormwater. And so I'm providing training on how to detect it, who to call, and what to do in the moment that you see something like that. And then in addition to that, good housekeeping practices, because especially at these wastewater treatment facilities, they're operating facilities. So the better housekeeping practices we have, the cleaner, safe, and safer places we have, the better operating facilities we have. So kind of, hierarchy of needs, right? So so those are the main topics I cover, but then to dive a little bit more into the pollution prevention that includes the salt reduction, I cover 5 main topics. And I'd like to mention that, oh, I clicked on the wrong slide. So this is the permit requirements, which I cover. The circled ones are the ones that I cover in the training. And then these are the 5 main topics I cover in the training. That includes the salt reduction conversation. And I wouldn't be able to do these trainings without the support of Wisconsin Saltwise and groups across the Twin Ports and Wisconsin with the resources that they have. So you'll see a couple different logos and credit here and there because I learned a lot when I started working here about salt reduction and pollution prevention. But yeah, so one of the main things I like to talk about is myth busting. Which includes like why it's important to practice smart salting. And some of those things include practices that people learned a long time ago that are now proven to not help reduce slips and falls. But as Chris mentioned, we are a city has a lot of water features. This is our sewer shed. So on the blue highlighted area is the municipal separate storm sewer system. So that's where all of the stormwater from our streets is being directed to our waterways, untreated. And then the green area is our combined sewer system. So we have both wastewater and stormwater getting piped into one pipe, and then it goes to a wastewater facility where it does get treated. However, chloride is one of those, sodium chloride, so the chemical compound that is one of those forever permanent pollutants. is a chloride, and so that actually passes through our facility, treatment facilities. It doesn't get treated, so it eventually does end up in our waterways, even though it does go to a facility. So this is just kind of a picture of where our stormwater is coming from and where it goes. So it goes to our nearest stream, entering our storm. Most of our stormwater is entering into a storm drain or ditch and then going to some of our favorite waterways. And so these are some of the main conversations I have with the public works employees, because while this is my everyday conversation, it's not folks that work directly next to me down the hallway, what they think and talk about every day. So I like to remind them that these are 7 named streams in Superior that receive a lot of our stormwater. Especially Faxon Creek, this orange stream is very urbanized, most urbanized stream in the city. But also all of those streams eventually outlet into Lake Superior. And so Lake Superior is a great branding tool when talking about water quality. So when I'm talking to folks in the city of Superior, it's like, this lake is a big reason why we're all here. It's our drinking water source. So when we are doing a lot of pollution prevention practices, and that include that salt reduction, we're protecting our drinking water source and one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world, which is pretty important job for us. So continuing on with topics that I touch on with that myth busting conversation. The main one I like to talk about is hearing the crunch of the salt beneath your boot. That is not true. It's not going to keep, so people think that if you're hearing that crunch, you're keeping people safe. There's no liability issues. But I'm trying to relay that conversation of, if you're removing the snow, if you're managing the ice and you're spreading the salt correctly, you won't have to over apply, and then you won't have those liability issues. So that's been a long conversation, and it'll keep happening, and we're working on delivering those messages as you shouldn't, and more of here are the facts, and we'll slowly get there. And then also talking about, like as Chris mentioned, chloride levels consistently getting higher because of that over salting that we've been doing for years and continue to do. So again, presenting people with the facts and hoping that it plants a seed, and then also providing them with how to properly salt, which comes with quite a few steps. One of them, the main thing being shoveling, moving that snow before it can adhere to the sidewalk or the roadway. And again, we're looking primarily at those main facility or those facilities, wastewater treatment facilities in Superior, that I'm talking with folks about small scale snow management. And the other thing is switching your de-icer. So not a lot of people know that the commonly used road salt doesn't work below 15 degrees Fahrenheit. So one of the other myth that I'm busting is using sand when it's colder out for traction, because salt doesn't work in those colder temps that commonly use road salt. So those are kind of the 2 main myths that I've been trying to bust. And it's going pretty well. It's slowly but surely the message is being received. And but also encouraging our facility to invest in other tools like these chippers, ice chippers, and things like that. Next, I like to touch on brine and how it's a great use. Like Chris had mentioned, it's a great use that we use in a larger scale, and it could be really effective here at our main wastewater facility too, because salt works better in solution. Excuse me, I take a sip of tea. Dry versus wet salt. Wet salt works better. It works faster, it's more efficient. But I also like to share with them how people are looking at different creative ways of maybe saving some money, and looking to their neighbor to use a cheese making byproduct called cheese brine. Greene County in Wisconsin is using cheese brine to use as an anti-icer. which is pretty cool. And some of the public works employees really like that perspective, especially since we're the cheese state. And then I also share with them some of the great things that Superior is doing, including investing in bigger, more efficient, upgraded trucks that help us do our job better, which is a really fun thing to share. But then on that smaller scale, so again, I'm looking at usually at a smaller scale conversation, how to calculate the amount of salt to use outside each entrance of our main facility building. So I did calculate this out, and then I provided a 12-ounce cup with like a mark where people should fill up their cup with smart salting with their salt. And again, these are all suggestions to hopefully get that mindset rolling for salt reduction. And then lastly, salt storage is really important. Salt it attracts water. So if you don't have it in a sealed container, it's gonna not act as well. Its chemical makeup is going to be slightly different than when you originally had purchased it. So when you go to apply it, it's not going to work as well. So we recently upgraded to some really nice containers that close all the way. Which has been really nice too. It makes our entrances just look a little sharp with our little Menards 5-gallon buckets. And then there's less chance for spills too. Again, it's looking at organization and safety as well. And I have included our safety coordinator in a lot of our conversations too, to talk about slips and falls and best practices for wearing cleats and staying on the sidewalk when the weather's bad too. So there's been a lot of conversation about best practices around a very wholesome approach to best practices of our facilities. But that's it for our conversation around the public works trainings. Allison, I can turn it back over to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Megan. Yeah, no, really incredible. I mean, yeah, Megan and I, like I said, everybody, we've worked together for years, but she really does lead as far as I know, the most comprehensive in-house training around salt-wise practices in the state. So kudos to you, Megan, for getting that word out. Obviously, as you shared, hitting streets, police, fire, and then like maintenance folks. It's, yeah, really incredible. Wish we had a Megan in every city.
Oh, thanks, Allison.
So with that, like I said, I've got a few questions, but I'm going to go first to our audience questions. So Paul had asked, so he's kind of commenting that on the mathematical calculations, Chris, that you shared earlier in terms of salt usage per inch of snow, and wondering if Superior is experiencing more freezing rain events now than you have in the past. And if so, then how do you feel like that's affecting salt usage? Because those calculations probably wouldn't be as helpful when freezing rain gets involved.
Yeah, we definitely get freezing rain. Whether it's more so, it's hard to say. Again, our weather's been really inconsistent from year to year. Last year we barely had any snow, which is really odd. The year before that, we had a tremendous amount of snow. So it's like the new normal, but yet nothing's normal. So it's hard to really predict.
Yeah.
But when we know freezing rain's coming, it's on the way. We take some steps. We do a lot of pre-treatment of the roadways. Like I mentioned the potassium acetate, for example, using pre-treating our bridge decks helps a lot. Those are the first things to freeze and cause issues. So getting the trucks out there before it starts snowing or before it starts raining in this case, and pre-treating those roadways to prepare them for the coming freezing rain.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely there, like you said, there's so much variability going back to like what metric can we use, right? Because even if we have one 12-inch snowstorm, that's different than 12 1-inch storms in terms of the amount of material likely that's going to need to be applied. For those who don't know, the DOT at state level does try to I should say more so than at a state level, kind of regionally come up with a winter severity index. So counties are then, I should say the DOT reviews county salt use based on that winter severity index. So you can, do endless analysis of kind of where we at and how does that compare kind of winter to winter. Well, we know winter to winter, we don't have all apples or oranges. And I wanted to also note, back to like freezing rain, we did have an excellent webinar last month with Matt Whittam from the town of Lynn, talking about strategies for ice. Because definitely in, I'd say, southern Wisconsin, Matt's way down by the Illinois border, we are seeing many more freezing rain events, and Matt shared some data on that. Another question here is, are there any studies ongoing around salinity levels in Lake Superior?
I
You
believe
know.
so. Megan maybe will answer more so. I know there's been a lot of research done statewide in Wisconsin that's detected increasing chloride levels overall in Wisconsin in water bodies. Lake Superior specific, I'm not sure of. I'm almost certain that probably there is, just given the importance of the water body. I don't know, Megan, if you know for sure.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it is difficult to know because it is such a large lake. I don't know if that information, I don't know of any information out there. I think that'd be a fun thing to research and figure out. But there's a system-wide monitoring program with the Lake Superior National Estuarine Research Reserve, and they have a sonde that takes in data, I think every 15 minutes in 4 different parts of the St. Louis River estuary. And one of them is at Barker's Island. Can I pull up a map?
Right now.
Yeah, would that be helpful?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Thanks for thinking about that.
I have a map and a graphic. I was actually going to share in the webinar, and so it's funny that this conversation came up. So when you're in the city of Superior, this is just Google Maps, and I'll zoom out. So this is about, just if you follow my mouse, this is about the size of the city limits, goes kind of all the way through here, more or less. And then when we're talking about that system-wide monitoring program, one of the monitoring sondes is right here at this little
Here?
little dock. And so it's taking in information from the St. Louis River and Lake Superior. So the St. Louis River and Lake Superior are constantly changing or exchanging water. And so they're collecting information that includes the specific conductance of the water. And over time, they have, excuse me, this information. So down here, annual anomalies over here, we're looking at specific conductance, and over time, we're seeing since 2015, there's been a significant decrease in specific conductance. So, and that's just looking at dissolved ions in the water. So it could be really from anything. So it could be from fertilizer, the soil, who knows? There's a lot of different things that could be contributing to it. So this is just data, but there is a chance that it could be showing the decrease in salt use, road salt use.
Now, this is a lot of data. But yeah, I guess the one thing, like you mentioned, Megan, I'm just going to say this for everybody. So specific conductance, like Megan said, while it is a measure of all of the dissolved ions in the water, so it's not specific to chloride, is often used as a proxy for chloride or sodium chloride, dissolved salt in our water. Because when we see huge spikes in the winter, more often, so in the like early springtime, those tend to be driven by road salt, influxes of road salt, salty meltwater. So what I'm looking at in this graph, Megan, you pulled up is kind of those monthly means. Well, looks like March, April, May, or yeah, tend to be like some of those higher months. And then also in that top chart, maybe, yeah, December coming in a couple years. So based on where I'm seeing some of those higher values, that's making me think that might be road salt driven. And I mean, in any instance, whether it is road salt or not, I mean, the fact that you're bringing down those anomalies means that you're doing your job, right? Whether it's
Hopefully.
road salt or some other illicit discharge. So cool.
So
Well, that's exciting.
I don't have any information on specifically Lake Superior, but the St. Louis River, the Twin Ports, is one of the largest ports on the Great Lakes. So we're one of those really big contributors to surface water pollution in Lake Superior. So when we can say that we're kind of reducing the amount of conductance reading, like lowering that reading, that's kind of cool. Anyway, that's all I have to add, I guess.
That's good. And I would say back to, yeah, kind of like Lake Superior. I don't know specifically. I was glad, Megan, you mentioned the Estrin Center because that was like the only kind of place that I was going to direct people. I do know there's been a lot of bigger studies that have led to white papers on salinity levels in Lake Michigan. But like Lake Superior, I mean, Lake Michigan is not as large as Lake Superior by surface water, but it is huge, right? And so the chloride concentrations, while they are steadily increasing, I want to say Lake Michigan is maybe around like 15 or 18 milligrams per liter right now. And since Lake Superior is even larger, my first, gut instinct would be that probably those values are even lower than that. So there is, because we have so much water, the ability to dilute a lot of that salt that comes in. Now, what's happening kind of in maybe some of the shallower areas, kind of closer to shore, like around Superior, maybe in where your drinking water kind of inlets are, those areas might be more saline than deeper in the lake, but you've got a lot of buffering capacity there. That's good. So I had a question, Chris, probably more for you. You mentioned that you guys were using potassium acetate for anti-icing, doing that pre-treatment on bridges, which definitely makes sense as bridges are, pretty costly to repair. So going with something that's pretty low in corrosivity compared to salt. Are you using straight sodium chloride brine to do any pre-treatment and the anti-icing of other roads? Or are you only anti-icing with potassium acetate?
We do use a mag chloride for that as
mag
well.
chloride.
Again, that's still a chloride, so we try to use potassium acetate when we can.
And then you're using straight mag chloride, or are you blending that into your sodium chloride?
Mostly blending it in, typically.
Yeah. That makes more sense to me. I was a little surprised you said we're using mag chloride, and I was like, whoo, that's a lot more expensive. But usually, like kind of like a 90-10 or 85-15, somewhere in there is, I'd say, kind of more common for people to get that benefit, right?
Yeah, I guess it gets mixed together when it gets dispersed from the truck. So it's like a pre-wetting agent as well.
Cool. I really loved the plow truck portal. Was not aware of that, so I'm definitely going to promote that. I have heard some people express some concerns around sharing that data in real time. Like, is someone going to go out to where the plow is and maybe some altercation would ensue? Have you guys experienced anything like that, or are you delaying the information that goes out to the public, or is that shared real time?
I think there might be a slight delay just based on technology. But we heard that concern on the front end. But it hasn't really proven to be a concern. I don't know. I didn't put a whole lot of stock into that concern because plow truck is pretty obvious going down the street. So it's It's not like they're stealthily sneaking by. So if someone wants to really confront a plow truck driver, they hear them coming for a while and they can walk out of their house and put their hand up if they want to, try to stop them. So